Hi, everyone. Our journey for the World Heritage and Multiple Memories has come to the fourth one. Welcome to the 2021 webinar series on the interpretation of World Heritage, hosted by Cultural Heritage Administration of Republic of Korea. I am Harry Shim from the Preparatory Office of WIPIC, that is International Center for the Interpretation and Presentation of World Heritage Sites under the auspices of UNESCO. The Preparatory Office is an organizer of this event, a UNESCO Category 2 center to be carrying out researching, capacity building, and networking in the field of heritage interpretation. The center will be officially established by end of this year. The webinar series is also in collaboration with the African World Heritage Fund, also a UNESCO Category 2 center in the field of World Heritage in Africa. We expect this webinar series to serve as a forum for discussing multi-layered narratives and conflicting interpretations of history related to World Heritage. Based on the last three expert discussions, this webinar is particularly presenting the stories of our global neighbors. We will screen the winning entries of the Heritage Interpretation Video Contest that we ran last month. Considering that it was our first contest and a short notice, we are grateful that we received a lot of competitive videos around the world. So today we will discuss how heritage interpretation contributes to peace and reconciliation through examples from Kenya, Iraq, Nigeria, Bangladesh, and India, the countries of the winners. Facing 50th anniversary of World Heritage Convention next year, I think this series will raise timely questions and provide good discussions for a better protection of our heritage. And now I would like to give a brief introduction about our moderator, Ms. Sue Hodges. Sue is a historian from Melbourne, Australia, with extensive experience in the fields of history, heritage interpretation, and sustainable tourism. She is currently president of ICOMOS International Scientific Committee on the interpretation and presentation of cultural heritage sites, a member of the ICOMOS Advisory Committee, and an international expert member of the Fondazione Romualdo Del Bianco. She was an invited expert speaker at the 40th and 41st sessions of the World Heritage Committee, President of Interpretation Australia from 2010 to 2013, and an executive committee member of Australia ICOMOS from 2012 to 2015. Now I would like to turn the time over to our moderator. Welcome, Sue. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Hari. And I'd like to say how honoured I am to be invited to moderate this session, and thank the Korea UNESCO for their superb work in organising these sessions. For those of you who don't know, ICOMOS is the International Council on Monuments and Sites, which its whole mission in life is to preserve and conserve cultural heritage. And recently, in the last, say, 30, 40 years, some huge issues have arisen for cultural heritage. Some of them are, that we're familiar with, are what we call contested histories, or histories that conflict. Other histories are about rights-based heritage, communities having their voice, multiple voices, multiple memories, as this session is titled. So ICOMOS looks at all of these issues theoretically and advises UNESCO too, which is one of its most important roles. But tonight we see what this means in practice. Heritage can be highly theoretical, as those of us who work in heritage know, but this UNESCO Category 2 Centre has done some really groundbreaking work in looking at what matters with heritage interpretation, what will make a difference. And this key topic of peace and reconciliation is one of the world's most pressing issues, and I guess has been for a long time. But tonight's session, we'll hear from the people who won the competition about how they've tackled this very challenging issue of how heritage interpretation can further world peace and reconciliation, particularly in their own communities. And as you'll hear soon, many of the people have reported on very, very difficult heritage sites where there's been enormous conflict or trauma. And what I was particularly interested in is what was happening on the ground in these places. How do we move heritage from theory to practice, and what will make a difference to these local communities? So I'd like also to commend all of the winners and the entrants and the enormous passion that they put into this project. It was very, very short timeline, as Harry has said, but we received some really wonderful entries, and I'd like to thank everyone who did present their videos in such a short time. So without further ado, I'll hand back to Harry, and we can hear from all of the winners of the competition. Thank you.
Okay.
Harry, you're on mute, I think.
Okay, sorry. Thank you, Sue. Okay, so now let's start our self-introduction for the winners and the presentation and screening of our winners entries. Why don't we start with you, Mercy?
Hello all. My name is Mercy Andeso. I am a research scientist at the National Museums of Kenya. I am glad to be here. I have done a number of research activities in my community back here in Kenya. And I feel honored to have won the first entry in this competition. And I'm certain that through all the videos that they shall pass a message to everyone, and we shall continue with the good work that we're doing in our communities to give knowledge about these sites and many other that are in the world. Thank you so much.
Okay, we're now going to play Mercy's video. So please be noted that because of the time limit, we shortened it down to the 1-minute highlight video. So enjoy. Okay, thank you. So every community has generational issues, and your video shows a good example for us that generational reconciliation and unity with natural heritage interpretation. Thank you. So now let's move to Yusuf. Yusuf, do you want to go next?
Yes, thank you, Harry, and thank you everyone for organizing this event that I personally very enjoyed and working on the video, and I'm honored to be here with everyone. So thank you for the introduction. So my name is Youssef. Like Harry said, I am a PhD researcher at Nottingham Trent University. I started 2019, hopefully, fingers crossed, graduating this year. So I'm also working as a research assistant. So I worked with multiple projects relating to cultural heritage in Jordan and Iraq. And I also work in part-time as a tutor at Nottingham Trent University as well. So my video tries to highlight this fantastic effort by Muslim individuals, and it tries to further understand the rationale behind this reconstruction. So the aim is to really assess how well the construction is going in contrast to the historic evidence of the location of these generational practices. And hopefully it will raise awareness about any possible change in the locations of these practices.
Okay, thank you. Now we're going to watch Yusuf's video.
It is only with memory that the continuation of heritage is possible. Mosul's old town suffered from mass destruction during the 2014 to 2017 ISIS insurgency, causing its most valuable heritage sites to become wiped. However, it is with the determination of the locals for a life that the city is being reconstructed. This determination compelled the locals, including shop owners, artisans, and intellectuals, to return, in search of not only peace, but reconciliation and restoration of heritage through the recreation of practices. The fortitude for peace governed the post-war life in Mosul. However, the question remains, how do you interpret such a rich history that includes multiple layers of culture, practices, and war and peace? Heritage interpretation in this case must focus on preserving, documenting, and narrating this shared memory, heritage practices, and interactions through facilitating workshops and interviews, and triggering spatial memories through cognitive maps.
الناس تعتز بهذا الشيء، تعتز بالتراث مال القديمة، يفتح النفس، تفتح النفس وتود الروح هاي المكان.
So here's to the people of Mosul, finding life below the rubble.
Well, thank you. That was beautiful. We could see people's everyday life along with the tangible heritage, and it left us a great question about memory and heritage. Thank you. And now let's move to Olufemi. Olufemi, please give us the introduction of yourself and your work.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. I'm glad to be here today, and I'm appreciate WAPIC for this opportunity to present my work. In short, I'm Olufemi Adetunji. I'm a Nigerian currently based in Australia. I'm a research assistant at the University of Newcastle, Australia, where I demonstrate my expertise in assessing and understanding climate risk, disaster risk affecting cultural heritage all around the world. And I've been able to use this video to demonstrate my expertise in this field and to find a way to illustrate heritage value and leverage it to address wider challenges affecting communities around the world, in Africa, in Australia, and most other countries all around the world. And this video illustrates a way that we could leverage the values of our slave heritage sites in Badagry to address the challenges facing communal peace, communal coexistence that exists within this community, in a way to bring about community development, whereby livelihood will be improved and enhanced. Thank you very much.
Okay, superb. Let's watch your film.
Barakun meaning barracks, which is used as the holding place for the captured slave, built for Chief Seriki William Abbas, who was a former slave turned slave merchant. The building is now used as Barakun Museum. This is the last spot in Africa motherland where the slaves will step on before boarding the ship. The history is connected to the agony and trauma of the colonial government. Over years, the members of Badagry and other neighboring towns are faced with difficulties in engaging with these buildings, facilities, and spaces. For instance, many community members regard themselves as victims and survivors of the practices of the slave merchants, resulting into family rivalry, communal violence, leadership tussles, and many more. The project seeks to initiate a rethinking process through development of positive perception of the slave heritage site, as well as leverage the values and significance of the heritage site to tackle current challenges to the communal peace, coexistence, diversity, and inclusion.
Thank you. That was great. We have a lot of issues in colonial heritage in Korea as well. And I think that video gave us a good reference for how to make a dark and contested past into the constructive future. Thank you. Now it's your turn, Kandokar and Imamur. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. This is Khandokar Mahfuz Alam. I am an architect and heritage professional, besides working at the Department of Archaeology, Ministry of Cultural Affairs of Bangladesh. I have conducted several architectural documentation and research-related projects on heritage building based on Bangladesh for past decade. Our project, which we submitted, this Accra was established in a context when there was a tension between power and religious practices. Now I would like to give the floor to our partner, Mr. Imamur Hussain. Imamur.
Yes, thank you, Mahfuz Alam Bhai. So this is Imamur Hussain. I'm a university lecturer and also I'm an architectural heritage practitioner. I'm also pursuing my master's major in heritage funded by the Commonwealth Scholarship. And my research focuses on critical discourse analysis within the interpretational paradigm. The competition has been a key motivator for me to look at the values of different heritage sites that shapes multivocality of meaning in their interpretation. And my video summarizes how interpretation as an intervention could be done in an empathetic and sensitive approach that contributes to cultural continuity. Thank you, Harry.
Thank you. Now let's watch your 1 minute highlight film. Please play the video.
Bitongol is about 196 kilometers away from the capital Dhaka. The site embodies a contested past that has been reconciled in the current interpretation. The historical context of this Accra encapsulates an expression of social power for the subaltern grassroots. In such antagonistic context, the ordinary people were thriving to have grace from being neglected and disregarded. While the site contributed in constructing peace and social harmony, it also has a spiritual meaning. The negotiations of meanings and values within the context had imposed challenges that contributed to obscuring multivocality and created difficulties in interpretation. Beyond the conflict-ridden historical context, in negotiating unity and equity, the inclusive atmosphere has been restored. The current interpretation of Bitongol Accra prioritizes the temple management committee in decision-making process that eventually ensures conserving oral histories, traditional performances, and ritual practices. Bitongol welcomes again the interfaith audiences and influence them to be active meaning makers in the ritual performances as well as secular activities. It significantly promoted a narrative of peace and solace beyond its boundary.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Now let's watch yours. Let's play the video. Oh, okay. Sorry. Yes, thank you. Okay, sorry. Okay, we have Ganesh here. So last but not least, the floor is yours, Ganesh.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ganesh Dutt. I'm a professional from India working in hospitality and tourism industry. I hold masters in tourism management and bachelor's in hotel management. I have started my career as a room attendant and I have worked with different hotels, including one of the iconic hotel in India, the Taj Mahal My video highlights the role of heritage interpretation for achieving peace and reconciliation following conflicts. I have prepared this video to highlight my concern for cultural heritage that has been the target of destruction due to armed conflicts around the world, including my own country, India. In this video, I have firstly explained the wide scope of cultural heritage, which is not just restricted to monuments, but is more connected to the people in their day-to-day lives. Afterwards, I have shared several examples that show cultural heritage has been targeted in conflict-affected countries such as Syria, Yemen, and Afghanistan, Iraq. Thereafter, my video brings forward the point that cultural heritage can actually play a positive role in building peace and reconciliation, as shown in the case of Mostar Bridge following war in Bosnia. My video concludes with showcasing of two projects in which technology has been used innovatively for heritage interpretation of cultural heritage that has been victim of armed conflicts.
Thank you, Ganesh. That's great. Let's watch yours. Please play the video.
Recovery of cultural heritage damaged by conflict is therefore essential not only for psychological healing of people that have become victims of conflict, it also helps in rebuilding societies through reinstating of social and cultural practices that are associated with heritage. Moreover, post-conflict recovery of cultural heritage should also strive to build back better by reducing vulnerabilities and enhancing resilience. UNESCO's project on reconstruction of the historic bridge of Mostar in Bosnia-Herzegovina following the conflict is a shining example that demonstrates how reconstruction of heritage can serve to build peace and reconciliation in societies traumatized by conflict.
Thank you. Ganesh's video covered a wide range of conflict heritage, and we have learned a lot from your video. Okay, thank you. Now we're going to have a bit of a discussion with the winners and moderator Sue. So Sue, do you want to proceed yes, moderation? Thank you.
Thank you, Harry. In this discussion, we have 4 topics that we'll ask different presenters to join in and discuss, people who won the competition. And we'll begin with the first topic, and each topic has 10 minutes. So we'll ask, yes, Harry? Okay, each topic has 10 minutes. The first topic which we'll open up is the question of what's the main issue in your video in relation to achieving peace and reconciliation through World Heritage? And more importantly, perhaps, how have you tried to solve that problem? So I'm going to call on people, and we have prearranged this, so we're not putting people on the spotlight unnecessarily. But I might begin with Mercy. How have you really looked at this issue in your, what's the problem that you're facing in your community, and how have you tried to solve it?
Thank you so much, Sue, for this opportunity. In my video, and particularly in our community, in regards to the sacred Mijikenda Kaya forests, well, these sacred sites face the problem of generational gaps. These sites have been predominantly taken over by the elders. The elders are seen as the custodians of these sites. So you find that the youths feel left out and other members of the community feel left out. They don't have the knowledge about these sacred sites, since they see that the elders are the ones who are supposed to be in there, they're supposed to do everything. So you find that there's poor governance systems. And in this video, I show that there are different activities or ways that the community and I involved have come up with to make sure that we bridge that generational gap. In that, the activities such as cultural walks inside the forest, building of the traditional huts together. As they do these activities, they create the tension between the elders and the youths. The gap is bridged, and you find that at a time when the elders won't be there, the youths would have gained this knowledge that they have been given from time to time to make sure that there is that continuation of the leadership and all that. So also you find that there's the problem of the elders being killed, because most of them here in Africa, they perceive the gray hair as witchcraft, and I'm so sure most of you have heard that. So you find that there are a couple of elders who have been killed, and it has been highlighted in the media. And you find that that's really a problem, because eliminating these elders means that the history won't be passed down to the youth. So that's quite a thing. The generation gap is quite an issue in our community. And I'm certain that through these activities that they do, the cultural walks, the building of the huts, cultural enterprises inside the forest, I'm certain that as they continue, the bond will grow much stronger. And I'm sure this animosity will reduce and eventually be eradicated. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mercy. And that was one of the things that the judges were really impressed by, the actual, I guess, the on-the-ground actions that really is making a difference at this time. So thank you. I might ask Olufemi to answer the same question. What was your video trying to address, and then how did you try to solve the issue in your community, Olufemi?
Thank you very much. I would like to add to extend what the key point that Mercy illustrated. She talked about generational gap. That is one of the issues that the project REBA, that's Rethinking the Barracoon, try to address. And we observe that the younger generations that are the future, that they hope for the tomorrow, they are disengaged, they are not connected to this slave heritage site in Badagry community. And we try to leverage that, integrating digital technology into it in a way that we're able to document this heritage site and we compress this in a form of knowledge and present this to the younger generations in schools in form of learning curriculum and all the rest. And also we leverage this also to address other border issues affecting the slave heritage site. Some of them is the challenge of deterioration, environmental risk, flooding that are impacting this heritage site. We try to assess this heritage site to understand the risk, the environmental risk that are impacting them, and try to present the knowledge about how to make this heritage site resilient to disaster risk and present it to the younger generations. This will afford the younger generations to understand. Now, these are the heritage sites within our community, and these are the ways we can address the risk facing this heritage site. By this, the heritage that was handed over by the previous generation, we're able to have that continuity to the future generation. Thank you very much.
Very much. Oh, sorry, snap. Thank you very much, Olufemi. What about you, Yusuf? How have you tackled these issues?
So thank you for the question. I think everyone is, if you see in the video, it's kind of, I elected to go more towards the kind of the documentary style video. And there's a deliberate reasoning for why I kind of made that decision. It's because I wanted to really address these cultural practices that are taking place, because in Mosul right now, there is no set governmental plan for reconstruction. And what that means is that all the construction efforts and reconstruction efforts that you've seen in the video are individually led. There's no governmental funding. So there's a lot of deeper multi-layered elements of and aspects of why they are coming back to these places. Why are they attached to these places? Why are they attached to their generational practices? And these generational practices, if they disappear, the whole historic core's identity disappears. So in a way, I opted to really document what's happening right now and how they are reconstructing right now, in order to maybe shed light on these practices and really highlight why are they important and what happens if they were to disappear. And that then kind of this is when the gap between kind of academia and practice happens, when academics really only study the meanings behind places and practitioners just aim to reconstruct. But I plan to understand why they want to reconstruct in order to be able to tell what changed and really raise awareness about this change that might happen in the place. So in this video, I tried to really capture this attachment to these places and what's been happening in these places and what are the practices and why they are important. And in a way, it's making sense of intangible heritage in a way, which is a very difficult task.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. And you'll see throughout the different styles of the videos, some people chose more of a PowerPoint style presentation. And as you said, you adopted documentary style. But I think it's really interesting that interpretation is also about documenting change as well as telling stories and creating meaning through your work. So each person's approach is differently. And what you've done is show how important it is to have a variety of approaches too. So thank you. And what about you, Ganesh? Do you have something to add to this? Ganesh, I think you're on mute.
In my view, the main issue is that we are not able to tell multiple narratives linked to heritage from various perspectives. As a result, partial or limited understanding of heritage by various sections of community makes it vulnerable to targets during conflict situations.
What about you? So how did you tackle the issue in your community, and and how you tried to solve the problem?
Pardon?
Oh, I was just throwing to Emma Moore at the moment.
Okay. Yeah. So the main issue in our project was the biography of this apparently harmonious site has a multi-layered past that encapsulates the dynamics of contrasting identities and duality of powers and also multiple memories. And there are negotiations in terms of social values, in terms of identity constructions, the representations and cultural practices. And these negotiations has been contributed to a conflict-ridden, non-linear historical context that obscured in the multivocality in interpretation. And the problem was resolved by authorizing the temple management committee in the decision-making process as the stewards. And this site has been reclaimed at the present that also empowered the subaltern grassroots communities and repositioned them within its domain. And the heritage endowment from the government, especially from the Department of Archaeology in the current interpretation, has also augmented the religiosity and endorsed their historical significance. So I think this is an exclusive example to keep the traditions living and to conserve the original values from infiltration, obviously. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We'll move on to the second topic now. And I think all of you have highlighted to some extent what issues arose in your community. But one of the key questions is that you've all begun work in your communities, but what do you think the main obstacles are moving ahead in achieving peace and reconciliation in your community through heritage interpretation? So I might call on Olufemi to start, to try to see, well, what can you do as you move forward? Because of course, even though you've all done really great work so far, it needs to be continued. And what's rising for you, you think, in the future that might stop some of these things from positive outcomes from happening?
Thank you, Sue. As the video demonstrated, the way to rethink the Barracan is to ensure that this heritage sites, heritage places are not, their perception is not limited to the materiality of this site, in a way that we could see them as part of the community, as part of as things, as places that contribute to the livelihood of the community. While we were in this community, we interviewed lots of community leaders, and we observed that many of them are not, despite being despite being descendant of families of former slaves, many of their forefathers are slaves or captured as slaves. They were not given that recognition to be integrated into how these slave heritage sites are managed. And also, we could see that there's this neglect on the part of the government, on the part of the government organizations managing these heritage sites, in a way that many of these sites are deteriorating, which is annoying, which is not making the people that are survivors of this slave heritage site to be happy about the state of the slave heritage site. And thereby we're trying to leverage this in a way that we'll be able to understand the risk affecting them and find a way to ensure that these obstacles are addressed going forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you. What about you, Yusuf? How have you how do you think you'll deal with obstacles that come up in the future with heritage interpretation?
Thank you for the question again. So I think generally in all post-war communities, really, I think the main obstacle is the lack of funding. And for that, we as researchers can't do much. I wish I could pay all my bank account to them, but unfortunately, we cannot do that. And I think generally with the lack of funding for reconstruction, there's a disconnect between the people and the central government, because they feel like they have been suffering from neglect because of this lack of reconstruction. And in Mosul's old town specifically, there's a very multi-dimensional nature of the issue, because, and I'm quoting the director of Alif when he said, Mosul's old town is a very sophisticated issue because it has multi-layers of security issues, which is keeping so many NGOs from actually going to the old town and attempting to reconstruct. And B, there is no set guidance for NGOs and for reconstruction. So there's the UNESCO, there's UNDP, and they're all kind of in conflict with each other, because the UNDP, for example, tries to reconstruct homes, but these are historic homes. So UNESCO is saying there are guidelines for building historic homes. So there is kind of a conflicted narrative to what's happening in the old town, and because of its historic nature, it's very contested in that manner. And I think in that way, we need to really adopt a bottom-up approach. And I think going forward, heritage interpretation becomes very valuable when creating this bottom-up approach, because we need to first speak to the locals and really understand what's important to them, to then be able to pinpoint what are the priorities for reconstruction, and maybe that will put everyone on the same page. So that's what I'm trying to really highlight in my video.
Thank you. Thanks so much. And on to Ganesh, how have you dealt with the problems in your community through your heritage interpretation?
Thank you for the question again. The main obstacle for achieving peace and reconciliation in my community is the diversity of views and belief systems, which makes it difficult to achieve consequences. And open-ended dialogue around and fostering the spirit of inclusiveness can help in overcoming the hurdle.
Thank you. That's really inspiring. What about Mercy? How would you answer that question?
Okay, thank you so much, Sue. I think the way forward for tackling these obstacles is ensuring that the history of these sites, specifically the sacred Mijikenda Kaya forest, is passed on to the community, is passed on to the youth, so that when it's time for them to come into leadership, they are able to have this knowledge about these sacred sites. And also it's important that the people in the community are in the know of the history of these sites, the cultural history, and the importance of preserving these sacred sites. In that, when they know the importance of preserving them, they'll have the urge to continue with what the elders have been doing. And also they should be these activities, for example, the cultural works, the construction, the bonding activities, they should continue, so that in future we don't face we don't face these animosities that we see between the youths and the elders. So I think the bottom line is that this knowledge, the historical knowledge, needs to be passed from the older generation to the younger generation, and that I know for sure will eradicate all these obstacles. Thank you.
Thank you. What about you, Emma Moore?
About the obstacles, I think we often undermine to link or bridge between the gaps of two modalities of complexities, I think. First, how we conceptualize the difficulties embedded within our heritage sites. And second, how we should align those to the reconciliation and implement in the managerial point of view. And as a result, this contributes in difficulties, and people cannot have meaningful personal or social experiences. And there are several negotiations, if we can see, in terms of social values or representation on cultural practices. And the problem arises when these meanings and values leads to obscuring the multivocalities. And if I contextualize from the community where I belong, in the post-colonial context, there has been migrations, changes of ownerships, and also atrocities happened, and which are very difficult and has very difficult focuses also to interpret from a neutral point of view. In the global south, we follow the traditional linear approaches in communication in the heritage sites. And this is also same case in the museums and exhibitions as well. And it is often harder and difficult to connect the audiences in the meaningful meaning making or learning approaches. And I think this results in challenges for achieving peace and reconciliations and for creating a proper context in the interpretive settings, I think. Thank you, Sue.
Thank you. That was a great answer. What I just wanted to remind everyone who's in these audiences in the different platforms, if you can leave your questions in the chat box, otherwise we're going to have to make some up. And we've already got 4 here. So please, everyone contribute. We want it to be really interactive. So we'll move on to the third part of this discussion. It's really looking at what kinds of interpretation thinking you've had, how have you used interpretive techniques in your videos. So I'll begin with Yusuf. How have you used interpretation and the thinking around interpretation to further peace and reconciliation? I think you've answered that really very evocatively in the previous question, but perhaps you can just elaborate a bit more on the thinking behind your documentary.
All right, thank you. So I think I'll pick up where I left off. This bottom-up approach that I was talking about. The fact that I think we need to take a step back. So I think my idea is that taking a step back and really speaking to the locals first and pinpoint what is important to them. So we are guilty as people who really like history that the first step for any reconstruction is historic sites. And to the people, these historic sites might not give them any economic return, and therefore they cannot justify returning to these places. And I know it's not only about economical returns, but this is the biggest incentive, if you will. So in a way, well, I'm trying to really understand what is important to the people and what are they trying to reconstruct. And that will help understand many layers of why the reconstruction is happening the way it is and why it is not happening in other places. So as the nature of Mosul's old town, it does have a lot of historic markets, and each historic market has its own historic story and historic functions. So some of these markets were restored quicker than the others. And the main reason for that, from speaking to these people, is that they kind of, one person came and then they motivated the other shop owner to return. So therefore it becomes like a domino effect of people really coming back because the others started to come back as well. So in a way, my video so this is on the first hand, the bottom up part, but on the other hand, my video is trying to really highlight this fantastic effort that's been happening right now. And this might help people to really understand that Mosul's old town is not just a pile of rubble. They actually found life. And that's why, hence the ending of my video, they actually did find life after below the rubble. And then they actually reconstructed from their own, from their own funding, and solely because of their passion to their practices. And maybe when people see that, it will start to give more a clearer idea of what's been happening in the old town, and maybe it will incentivize some people to return as well. Fingers crossed.
Thank you. That's a really important point about the economics of the sites as well, and that people might want to keep an historic site, but it's so expensive, but then they funded it themselves, which is really because they understood the meaning of the site to them. So that's what's so powerful about your work. Thank you. I might move to Imamor now. How would you answer that question? How were you thinking about heritage interpretation when you made that video?
From our video, it can be concluded that meaningful interpretation through participation and co-creation is needed. Also, this happened organically in our site, but most importantly, unlike other sites, the custodians did not impose any authoritative interventions here. And my point of departure from this is the interpretation should not be seen in isolation, and we should consider the entire visit, how the senses of our audience are stimulated and what memories and learning a person can take with her to her home. And I think by engaging in this process and by bypassing the authoritative way of curation, meaningful interpretation can be done, and how the objects and places can construct identity and has significance and value can be promoted. And I think Mahfouz Alam, he can continue from here, the video part, if you can listen.
Sorry?
Yes, sorry.
Yes, sir. I was asking you.
Ruman, my connection is up and down here. So that, okay, please question again. Sorry?
So we've been asked how the video shows that how we have used heritage interpretation for further peace and reconciliations in our context. Okay, I think I can take it from here.
Okay.
No
Thank you.
problem. Yeah,
it was a good try, but we'll move on to Olufemi. How have you really thought about what interpretation is when you're making that film?
Thank you very much, Sue. I would like to add that in the context of the slave heritage side and what we demonstrated through the project RIBA, heritage interpretation should be viewed beyond the use of storytelling, the use of teaching method, beyond the use of documentation, writing, art, design, and curation, to really to portray the values of heritage side. We can extend heritage interpretation to influence development at the community level and address different social, economic, and environmental challenges facing community. Back to the video that we sent in, we demonstrated how we can leverage heritage, interpret heritage, and leverage it to make communities understand the kind of climate and disaster risk facing their community in a way that they'll be able to understand they'll be able to know and be able to action some practices that will make their communities resilient to disaster risk, as well as resilient to climate change impact. That is one of the aspects that the video has demonstrated, and we could see that heritage has a multi-pronged powers, multi-pronged influence on different aspects of the community. Thank you very much.
That's a great answer, and particularly thinking about issues such as climate change. And it's worth mentioning the International Council on Monuments and Sites has identified climate change as the most important issue for everyone in UCAMOS, and I'm sure we'd all agree that. So, as well as all the other really pressing issues, that's, I think, top of the list, I think, in a way at the moment. Thank you. Sorry, I'm on mute. We've had one question in the questions and answers, and it's a very sophisticated question. So we'll ask other people to contribute to Q&A as well. And I have some of my own team from my work here, so I'll force them to do that if they don't do it natively on the chat line. So anyway, I will now move on to the final question in this discussion. What were your thoughts and feelings when you produced the video, and why does your video matter? So I'll throw this open. Who'd like to answer this first? Otherwise, I'll choose someone.
Can go first.
You go first.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, thank you. One key factor that motivated me to really initiate this project is I come from Nigeria. Within my community alone, we have 6 different heritage buildings and 18 heritage sites. And the last time I was there, it was around, I think, 10 years ago. And when I went there in 2019, I could see that 80% of this heritage site has been demolished. And I observed that that made me to think that these are places that has been destroyed, that the community is at loss of, that can be leveraged, that can influence development within the community. When I looked at the areas of development of the community within that 10 years, I could see a negative value. The community has not really developed in the education sector, but all this heritage site has really been destroyed to build houses that people don't really live in. And that's why I initiated this project to demonstrate the way that we could have a rethink, to have a review, to have a new perception about the places that conserves our history, and a way to leverage it, in a way to use them, in a way for them to influence development at the community level. Thank you very much.
Thank you. What about you, Mercy? I'll call on you next. What were you feeling when you were doing the film, and why does your film matter?
Okay, thank you so much. While I was doing this video, even when you watch the video, I felt that there is need for the youth to be more engaged in matters of the community, and especially when it comes to these World Heritage sites. You know, most of the youths are not interested in knowing the history behind this site. So I felt that there's need for the youth to be more engaged and to be more interested in these heritage sites, because that is our future. That is our heritage. That's what we need to preserve, and that's what our future generations are going to have. And also last year we did a project in one of the sacred sites in the Mijikenda Kaya forest to assess the impact of COVID-19 on the sites. And we found that there is due to people losing their jobs and going back to the rural areas, there's illegal poaching, there's the forests are being destroyed, and I felt that there's need to actually let the people know the importance of these sites, of these sacred sites, and the importance to us. Well, we just don't have to destroy them, but there's need to preserve them, because in one way or another, if we preserve them, they really do take care of us. If we take care of the sites, they really do take care of us. Yeah, and I felt that heritage interpretation is a tool for conservation, whereby people are given information about these sites, for example, the museums. And yes, there's need to I felt that there's room for much needs to be done. Thank you.
Sorry, thank you very much. What about you, Ganesh? What were your thoughts and feelings when you produced the video, and why does your video matter in terms of furthering peace and reconciliation?
Thank you for the question again. As I belong to the state of Jammu and Kashmir in India, that has witnessed conflict for decades since my childhood. I have seen heritage becoming victim of these conflicts, and I can feel the pain associated with the loss of one's heritage. This has been real motivation behind my video.
And I'll move on to Yusuf now. What's your response to this? Obviously, you're also very passionate about your work.
Yeah, you're correct about that one. So I'm originally from Iraq, and while I'm not from Mosul, it directly impacts us as people, as a whole nation, really. But the idea is not about nationalism, or it's more or less about human right. And when I was interviewing participants, whether online or in the field, I found that they do have a lot of passion about their old town, and it's to them, it's not only about their markets, it's not only about their homes, it's also about their identity and their sense of attachment to these places that they cannot explain with words, really. And that's why my question when I asked them, how do you identify yourself, what building identifies you, and they really failed to answer that, because to them the entirety of the old town identifies them. So to answer the second part of the question of why does my video matter, is because media in Iraq is severely controlled, and because there is no clear governmental plan for the reconstruction, so there's not really any documentation officially about this reconstruction efforts, the fantastic reconstruction efforts that they are undertaking. And this whole idea of them reconstructing with no documentation means that they're doing it for themselves, they're doing it for their whole community. And that's why I think that documenting these efforts and the reasoning behind these efforts is very valuable, and currently it's non-existent, unfortunately.
Thank you very much. And finally, Emma Moore, what's your thoughts on this? And how do you feel it matters?
Yeah. So the competition has been one of the key motivator for us to look at the different meanings and values of different heritage sites that shapes multivocality in their interpretation. And due to the COVID scenario, we cannot go to the site, but we have explored a number of sites, and we learned that Bangladesh is embellished with a plethora of architectural heritage sites that significantly contributed in shaping the cultural landscape of this country. And they also have multiple meanings embedded within them. And we found several audiences that are coming to our site. They experience the site, the past within the present, decide to be infused with the indwelling sacred presence within the divine. And to answer the second question, I think the interpretive intervention should be done in a careful way, that it must not change the authentic fabric of the intangible sites. It's not just particularly for the religious heritage sites, but for all sites. And in my context, the worshippers, they could maintain the relationship with the divine. And at the same time, they can preserve the social connection among themselves through informal congregational activities and secular and non-secular activities. And this confirms the cultural continuation in a collective way through civil engagement. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, I can't. Thank you. I've overlaid the mute button. There we go. I'll just get you. We're about to move to the questions and answers, but I'll ask each of you to summarise very briefly What's the one thing that you think heritage interpretation can do to further peace and reconciliation based on your work? How do we move into the future with it? So I'll just go, let's see who I choose first now. Let's try, seeing you there, Emma Moore, how would you answer that? What's the takeaway from your work for other people working in this space?
I think the most important part should be to carefully look at how the sites have should retain the authenticity in terms of its material fabrics, in terms of the settings, and in terms of all the physical attributes. But also we need to consider how the intangibility is there, and it also matters because people should maintain their social connection. It should be focused at how identity is created and how identity should be retained in a context. And interpretation should be done in a very critical and very careful way. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's call on Ganesh. Where are you? I can't see you there. Ganesh.
Yes.
What is the one thing you would recommend to people in the future based on your work that would make a difference through heritage interpretation to achieving peace?
To people, I would like to say, like, as I'm from the country, like, like India is a country, like where I'm staying. Here the people are from the different backgrounds. They have different cultural backgrounds. They are from the different languages, and people of different religions are living here. I would like to say, I will say that they should respect each other's each other's cultures, their values, and government should also and civil bodies should also look into this, and they should promote the cultural practices which are nowadays, which are now vanishing, uh, which are nowadays vanishing, and people are forgetting, especially the youth.
Thank you. What about you, Mercy?
Thank you so much. The main, for me, I think that the main issue should be passing down of the passing down of knowledge about these heritage sites. I think with that, that covers a lot. For example, I would, given the mandate, I would, for example, say that they should have programs, for example, in schools where they teach the young children about these sites, because we find that there is no, in the whole, for example, the whole curriculum, there is no place where the students are taught about the importance of our heritage sites and all that. And even people in the community, while I work with them, you ask, for example, you ask them, have you been to this sacred site? They tell you no. Do you know about the history of it? They tell you no. So the bottom line is that these people in the community, they should be given the knowledge, the historical knowledge, the cultural knowledge about these sites and the importance of preserving them. I think with this knowledge, knowledge really sticks in your mind. And I think with this, moving forward, they will have so much. When they're given this knowledge, they will be in a position whereby they know the importance of preserving these world heritage sites.
Thank you. And now I'll call on Youssef.
Thank you for that question. I think, well, on the risk of sounding like a broken record, I think the idea from my video and that I would like to see more about it in kind of reconstructing not only the old town, but also generally in post-war communities, is that the priority should always be on listening to the people first, and they should be the first step into an authentic reconstruction. Because if it wasn't for them, the historic site wouldn't exist. Because the reason why we attach the history and the identity of these places is because of their functions, and people's continuity and continuation of caring about these places is what made them historically valuable. And that's why the first step for each reconstruction should be on the people's narratives and stories. And that's what I'm hoping to have achieved in my video.
Thank you. And finally, Olufemi.
Thank you very much. I would like to emphasize intentional community participation, where all stakeholders will have that understanding that they matter in the interpretation of this heritage site. Because in the community where the project Riba focused on, we will see the contention between two families that participated in their forefathers as former slaves. They were slave merchants, and that contention still lingers till today, because the government has interpreted the slave heritage site based on the narrative of one of the families. But if we allow intentional community involvement where all other stakeholders are involved, I believe it will engender peace and coexistence within the community. Thank you.
Thank you. And so thank you so much, everyone, for that really great participation in the discussion about your films. And now we'll move on to the questions and answers, which we have so far 2 questions and 1 is coming in, but the first question is quite a complicated question. So I will speak slowly and then try to answer it myself as Harry's asked, and then throw it open to other people. So Manu has said, quote, "Today, heritage must be interpreted in inverted commas." And you might, can everyone see the Q&A? Harry? Okay, good, people can see it. So basically the gist of the question is that cultural heritage has been invented essentially, and it's shifted from what were once real objects, places and traditions in everyday life into artificial and contrived domains. So then what are the political implications of constructing versions of meaning, such as national identity and master narrative? This is actually a PhD. Is there or should there be one universal interpretation for all, and how would this be accommodated in times to come, as several of the nation states you've mentioned have raised? So I might answer the first part, or attempt to, and then throw this open to other people. So I would say, I mean, I'm a postmodern thinker, I guess, and I'd say heritage has always been invented, as it were. It's always a choice about what you represent. And the idea of real objects, places and traditions is really valuable, but not everyone, on the other hand, understands their meaning. And certainly I've struck this a lot in my own work and with the team that we all work with at my business, that people assume that everyone understands something, and in fact, often that knowledge is a privileged knowledge or something someone may have over generations. And the task of interpretation, I believe, is to really start thinking about what different meanings can be held about a site or a place, and then to explore that with the different communities and audiences. So I don't believe there's a fixed meaning or a master narrative. I think there are multiple meanings, which is the topic of this whole session. But that by assuming an essentialist viewpoint, it sort of means that people are locked out of interpretation. They don't understand what a site is. And what we're trying to do, I think, in this work is to show the many possible meanings and allow those meanings to change and shift and be dynamic as more people contribute. So that will be my answer. But then I'll throw it open to everyone here. What are the implications of heritage interpretation? Should there be one universal interpretation for everyone? Who would like to answer that question? Or maybe argue with me or argue with Manu about what, if you have different ideas. There's many ways of thinking about this.
Yeah, can we?
Bring this question. I'll call on someone, otherwise we don't want that.
Should I go? Okay.
Please go.
Okay, so I think, yes, heritage places, objects or sites have multiple meanings, and it's from the authoritarian or managerial perspective that which meaning should be highlighted. And there's something, heritage is always political, And maybe some people or some communities are always disregarded or misinterpreted or undermined. It always happens in the heritage context. And if we see the Foucault's power knowledge relation, and obviously you are staying in Australia, if we see the discourse of authorized heritage discourse by Professor Lorgen Smith.
Yep.
Yes, she discusses a lot about this. She conceptualizes heritage as a product that has a social meaning, that has a cultural meaning as well, and it emphasized the materiality, it emphasized um, uh, the arguments, those comes with the aesthetics and superior principles. And she says heritage is beyond the objective notions. And I also think that there is also a power knowledge relations that how we perceptualize, how the ideologies are there, and it dictates the social meanings also. Yes. Thank you.
If I can add to what Imamo just said, in my community, there's an hadith that says, if you have 4 children, you won't kill the three of the children to allow one to grow. You allow the 4 of them to grow together. That's one of the concepts I will apply to heritage. All the meanings you are allowed to develop to be expressed without limitation, without authorizing anyone. By the time one is authorized, the other meanings, those that identify with other meanings will be silenced. Let's allow all meanings to grow. Let's allow all meanings to be expressed. And we'll all have a joy. We'll all have a way to enjoy heritage from all the angles that we can enjoy it from. That's my perception about it.
We've got quite a few questions coming in now. So one of the issues that Manu raised was about the role of the nation state in heritage, and that's a very important topic. So perhaps I could ask one of the winners to talk about how you deal, and it happens to everyone everywhere, it's in a sense, how do you deal with a situation where a nation state, a government, a client, a powerful person wants one story to be told, and you know that the community wants another story to be told? What have people done in this situation? Mercy, you look like you might want to answer that.
Yes, thank you so much. I'll give an example of here in Kenya about the occasional killings of the elders. You know, at times the government doesn't want these things to be seen, but in the real sense, these are issues that need to be addressed. So I feel that the community is given the power to tell their stories, and that's why that's why we get these stories, the media highlighting these stories. And in our community here, I haven't seen so much of that conflict between the community wants to tell another story and the government wants to tell another story. The media is quite powerful here, so they highlight each and every story as it is. So if there are killings here in a certain sacred forest, they will highlight that. They will not hide anything. So I think here we are really privileged to have a free media where they tell the stories in the community just as they are. Yes.
Thank you, Mercy. I might move on to Catherine's question. How would you monitor the effects of community engagement in terms of the reconciliation of heritage sites? So when you engage with the community, how do you know whether that's going to be successful or whether it's worked? So who'd like to answer that?
I can go.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think there's no kind of linear monitoring process for such an intangible parameter as the reconciliation, because reconciliation can take multiple forms. It can convert into actions on the ground, and it can convert to just reminiscing and ideas of actually wanting to return. So the idea of contested heritage and the idea of reconciliation with contested heritage are very untouchable, kind of intangible parameters that are when you study them, there are multiple nuances attached to them. So, for example, when I spoke to diasporas, they were very helpless. They wanted to return, they couldn't return. But in a way, they made peace with the fact that that's still their home. They still want to return to it at some point. While other people took it into their hands, and they actually went back and reconstructed their market. So in a way, there's no set way to monitor it. I think there are multiple variables that need to be taken into account to be able to really understand the individual reconciliation processes.
Thank you. That's an excellent answer. I'll need to move on because we don't have very long left. But we've had a really interesting question come in on YouTube, and that is, if the interpretation of reconciliation and peace is made from the victim side, do you think you can really reach peace without any cooperation or consultation with the perpetrator? And that's a huge question for heritage. So, and it's actually a question UNESCO and ICOMOS are really dealing with at the moment in many areas. So who would like to answer that? What if you have a victim story and then can you reach peace without consulting the perpetrator? And I'd even say further, how do you then interpret that? You know, what do you do with the perpetrator's story?
I think for the heritage practitioners, the advocacy roles comes here, because first the victim side is always he or she, the community always feels that an empathetic approach should be done, and it's always comes the negotiations and how the decisions can be perpetuated in this context. And this is a very, very difficult question to answer because it doesn't have any straight answer, and it's a very long and non-linear approach that how the things can be reconciled, how the context should be interpreted. Yes, and I think advocacy is the first priority here.
Thank you. What about other people here? How would you think about answering that question?
Oh, if I would add to what Imam said, it's very complex, but the perpetrator still has that power, and the victim or the survivors, their powers are dwindling. That's why we should always not put in more encourage the powerful to get more powers, and ensure that we give more powers to the victims to really express themselves, because it helps the healing process that needs to take place. That's why the story of the perpetrator is in some context, it's not really the important at that stage, but it's for the survivors to express themselves, for them to have that healing, and to initiate that healing process.
What about, though, the argument that we need to understand what drives someone to do terrible things? Does that have a place in interpretation? I'm asking everyone here. I don't know the answer to that. Would anyone like to try to answer?
Can you ask the question once again?
I just added to the question, what about the perpetrator's story? Is there any value in understanding what drives people to terrible behaviour and terrible acts? And that's a question for not just heritage, but for everything, particularly in terms of violence and hatred and rape. What value is there in knowing? Is there any point at all in telling that story? Does it help people understand or heal?
Yeah, can I add to that? Can I attempt to answer? Well, in the terms of the research that I've undertaken, is basically there's a term called herbicide, and that's the urban term of genocide. So you have genocide, which is the ethnic cleansing, and we have herbicide, which is the urban cleansing. And for that, when I studied the pattern of the attacks on the old town, I found that it's deliberate on the old town rather than the whole entirety of Mosul. And that's because it encapsulates all these heritage sites. So in a way, it's a systematic attack to really wipe the identity and wipe people's beliefs. It's a total annihilation of the whole aspects of the human nature, not only their homes, but also their identity. It's kind of like wiping their face expressions of them. And there's one participant that I'm gonna finish with this, and he said, he said a metaphor for Mosul's old town is like a person that survived an accident, but his face was wiped. And that's exactly what herbicide is. They try to wipe the face, even though the body can still be functional.
Thank
I
you.
would also like to answer this question.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, our role is to bring multiple viewpoints together, and this requires special skills of negotiations and dialogue. And we need to engage all sections of the community.
Thank you, Ganesh. There was one instance, a friend of mine in Australia her ancestor was responsible for massacring Aboriginal people in the central part of Australia. And they held a healing ceremony 3 years ago with the Aboriginal people, the descendants. And that, to me, that was very powerful. It's sometimes impossible to do that, but it really seemed to heal people. So that would be one suggestion, maybe ceremonies, or actually if people move from a position of power to one of, I don't know, sorrow or apology or whatever you might call it, that is an option in these terrible situations. But quite often, as Olufemi said, sometimes the perpetrator still has power and is still doing that same thing. So we might move on now, because we only have a couple of minutes, to a question from Rose Biju, which is, I think it's to Youssef again. How do the local practices and interactions help with the construction of Mosul, or the reconstruction of Mosul?
I'm assuming that's for me.
Yes.
Well, yeah, I think it's actually a very, well, it's an easy question. It's very understandable why it would be asked, because generally when we look at people's reconstruction efforts, and we look at reconstruction, people's practices, and then the reconstruction plans, it's kind of not attached, because, you know, how does the person speaking to a shop owner help them reconstruct their homes? But actually, this triggers multiple aspects in the human behavior and the human remembering. So there's a difference between collective memory and collective remembrance. So collective remembering highlights the contested kind of narrative-driven history, and that usually drives people to understand spaces the way they do. And through these practices and interactions, it will help trigger these collective remembering memories, and then that will possibly encourage people to return and reconstruct. So it's indirectly related, but it's a very important factor to study when it comes to reconstructing contested heritage sites.
Thank you very much. I think we'll need to move on now to concluding remarks, but I'd like to thank everyone for participating so well, and also for keeping to time. Remember, we had that chat yesterday, and it was just, I know from a moderator's point of view, it was fantastic. And as well as that, but what I guess the next stage of this is my own concluding remarks. And what I think is really powerful is that the videos have started a really important series of conversations, which particularly came through in the questions and answers and the discussion that everyone had about the key themes of this session. And they're questions that can't be answered in this forum, or indeed probably at all. But what I think everyone has shown is the beginnings of how we deal with these things. And it's, of course, not just the people here, but the whole of cultural and natural heritage is full of people trying to answer these questions. But what's been most profound for me in being a participant in this process is seeing how local efforts can make a massive difference. It's not on a global scale that peace will come, but through local actions one by one. And I trust that everyone participating in today's webinar will understand the importance of the actions that all of our winners have made to contributing to peace, and really understanding that it's not simple, that it's a process and that you're either at the beginning of that process, in the middle, probably not at the end, but that it needs to be ongoing. And there were many things in today's discussion that really struck me, but again, the dogs are barking just as we finish. They're locked upstairs, apologies. One thing that really struck me was the importance of community and bottom-up methodology again and again. It's not from experts or dogs. No, sorry, it's not from experts that the answers will come necessarily. It's from communities working and also working with people trained in heritage, working together in genuinely cooperative way. That will be what changes things and changes things to people on the ground. So on that note, I'd like to thank you all very much again for this wonderful discussion and for the huge effort you've put into this process over the last few months. And I'll hand back to Hari. Thank you, Hari.
Thank you. Thank you, Sue. Thank you so much for your wonderful moderating. And Mercy, Yusuf, Olufemi, Kandakar, Imamur, and Ganesh for your films and passionate presentation to us. I think it was a very special session in the sense that we made a discussion with not only experts like professors, but also the PhD students and researchers and museum practitioners. And it was a very beautiful experience. And above all, the audiences who participated in the discussion for making this webinar all the more interesting and interactive. So today's discussion will lead to the next webinar, where we'll be discuss the role of responsible institutions and civil society approach for dealing the multiple memories and heritage under the moderation of Dr. Francesco Bandarin. So, sorry, so please don't miss it. And we still have 2 more webinars to come in the next couple months. So please join our journey till the end. So thank you again for joining us today. And we hope to see you at the next webinar in June. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.